Bienvenidos
Hello, welcome everybody
a esta actividad. Un
to
saludo muy
this
grande desde el
activity.
Profesorado de Extensión y
We
Actividades
really
Intermedias,
want
a
to
a los
greet
presentes, a las colegas, a los
the
colegas
people in the
y a los que están
audience,
siguiendo desde
our
Sudáfrica
colleagues,
por Zoom.
and the
También
colleagues
para
who
ellos
are
un
there
saludo
in
muy
South
grande
Africa.
desde
We want
Uruguay.
to greet you
Muchísimas gracias
very
por
warmly from
acompañarnos en esta
Uruguay.
mañana, en esta
Though,
actividad.
thank you for being here today.
Lo primero,
The
agradecimientos que son
first
muchos,
thing, we
muchos,
have
muchos
many,
agradecimientos
many
para que
thanks
esta
to
nuestra
give.
actividad haya sido posible. En
There's
primer lugar, al
many people
profesor
to
Agustín
thank
Cano,
for this
quien fue
activity.
portador de esta
Firstly,
iniciativa,
Agustín
quien se
Cano was
entusiasmó inmediatamente.
the
Hay aquí una red activa,
main
hay una intención, un trabajo
organizer
a
of
lo
this
largo del tiempo
activity.
que
He
nos
has
permite
been
colocar las
working
discusiones sobre
for a long
extensión
time
en
in
un
this
plano más
activity,
amplio,
and
en un
he
espacio
allows
de
us
diálogo
to
global, en un
work
espacio que
with community
trasciende
engagement
incluso las fronteras regionales,
uh,
que son las fronteras con las
outside
cuales nos hemos
the
sentido más
limits
cómodos
of our
habitualmente.
country and
Entonces,
outside
poner a
our comfort
disposición el
zone.
aporte, las redes, el trabajo de
Being
colegas de
able
distintos
to
países,
work
en este
with
caso de
colleagues from
Sudáfrica,
other
pero
countries, in
también
this case from
contamos
South
con la
Africa,
presencia de
but
Matías Flores, a quien
also
agradecemos muy
with
especialmente
people like Matia
su presencia
Flores.
aquí, de la
We are
Universidad
very
de Chile.
thankful for
Actualmente está en
him.
Cornell,
He
mañana
is
nos acompañará
right now in
especialmente. También
Cornell,
colegas de Costa
and
Rica y de
he's
Argentina.
going
Entonces,
to
Agustín,
give
muchas gracias
his presentation
por esta
tomorrow. Thank
posibilidad,
you, Agustin,
por
for
esta
this
instancia
opportunity,
de tener estas jornadas de discusión, de
for
reflexión, de
this.
intercambio en los diálogos sur-sur, nos
We
parece una
are really
oportunidad
thankful for
extraordinaria.
this
Luego,
opportunity
además de
of talking
agradecer
between the
a los
South and the
colegas
South.
y a las
We
colegas que
also
nos
want to
siguen
thank
desde
the
distintos
colleagues
lugares, un
who
agradecimiento
are
también a quienes han
listening
hecho
to us from
posible
other
que esta
people, from
actividad
places, and
empezara
we are
hoy,
very
pudiera
thankful
empezar a
for
salir
everyone
y
who made
esperemos
this
muy bien
possible
y que va a
today.
salir especialmente bien.
We are
Al
expecting
área
this to
de
be very
traductorado de la Facultad
fruitful.
de Derecho
We
por
also
articular
want
esta
to
actividad con
thank
traducción simultánea.
translation, the
Les
translation degree,
agradecemos
who
enormemente la
are the
colaboración y
students
la habilitación para que esta
translating
actividad sea así,
today,
que los
and
diálogos puedan
they enable
efectivamente
us to
realizarse. Muy especialmente
let
el
other people
agradecimiento
a la unidad de comunicación de
y
activity.
también a la
We
unidad de
also want
comunicación
to
central de la Universidad de la
thank
República,
the
que han apoyado desde el inicio
campus
y que han permitido
communication
hacer
services and the
este
UDELAR
evento
communication
pueda ser
services who have
transmitido
enabled
virtualmente, que
us
después
to
quede como
broadcast this event today
repositorio en el espacio
and to
de la
store
Universidad
it
de la República.
within the
A
university's
nuestra área de gestión
storage.
administrativa del
We also
Doctorado de
want to
Extensión y Actividades
thank
en el Medio, muchísimas gracias
the
por el apoyo, por
administrative
la
division
colaboración,
of
también
community
para que
engagement,
este seminario tenga lugar,
because they
porque
have
han
made this
trabajado
possible.
para estas
We want
jornadas
to
mi,
thank
mi más profundo agradecimiento.
everybody who has made this
A
possible
ver, es
too.
una oportunidad,
This
no voy
is
a ser
an
largo para
opportunity.
dar paso ya al intercambio,
I
pero
will be brief
esta actividad
so
se
we can
inscribe
begin, but
o es parte de un proceso, como yo les
this
comentaba, de
activity is
articulación,
a
de diálogos
process
que
of
académicos y colegas
dialogue
de nuestro
and
país han
colleagues
construido
working
a lo largo del
together
tiempo. Nos genera
within our
una
country
especial expectativa,
for
nos abre
many,
una
many
oportunidad,
years. We have
nos
an
permite
opportunity
poner en
here,
cuestión algunas cosas.
and we are
Esto de poder
questioning many
revisar
things
tradiciones,
about our
comparar
system.
experiencias,
We are comparing
abrir las fronteras
experiences.
justamente
We
del
are opening
diálogo
the
en
boundaries of
términos
extension
organizativos, de los
and of
desafíos
community
de todos los
engagement.
proyectos
We are
universitarios
facing
absolutamente
many,
marcados por vientos
many
muy distintos de
challenges
todo tipo y
because
color.
of many
Algunos de estos
different
momentos muy adversos
um,
en América
situations,
Latina, ni que hablar,
and
pero imagino que también en otros
partly
contextos.
in Latin
No
America, but
podríamos,
also in many
muchos
different political
podríamos
contexts
detallar hoy aquí,
throughout the
pero
world.
me parece
We
que esta es
are
una
being
oportunidad
forced
justamente
to do
de
things in
asumir
some
esta
ways we are
posibilidad de
not
estar
going
en
to
otra
discuss
agenda,
today, but
de nuevos
we are,
diálogos,
of
de
course,
nuevas
considering this
alternativas en términos
as a
de
matter of new agendas and
proyecto sectorial, universidad y
working with
universidades
new
públicas.
projects, working with
Uruguay está viviendo, la
projects
Universidad de la
in
República
public
particularmente,
universities.
está viviendo una
Universidad de la
coyuntura
República
especial de
is
transformación
going through
en estos
a
meses
transformation
y esperamos a que
process
se profundicen de sus
these
órganos de gobierno
months, but
centrales.
we are
Sus
hoping
estructuras
this will
estatales
go
de
on for
organización
many, many
están siendo
months
revisadas
now. We are
y si
revisiting
el cálculo no me falla,
every
para que tengan una idea, esta sería la primera actividad
our
pública que nosotros
organization,
realizamos
and this
con
is
un prorectorado de
our
extensión y actividades en el
first
medio
activity
oficialmente creado.
with
Hasta diciembre, fines de diciembre del
a
año pasado
newly
no existía en el
created
Uruguay el prorectorado de extensión y
pro-rectorate
actividades en
of
el medio.
engagement activities, services. We want to shape this institution, we want to get the best out of it, and we want to make community engagement something with structure in Uruguay. We have to revisit tradition for this. We have to incorporate tradition, currents, new currents, re-edit some of the new debates of the extension and the community engagement activities. We have to be honest about how difficult it is to have information about community engagement, and we have an opportunity now to make this more clear and to work as an institution to make this more clear, to think about this, and to have a university policy which is oriented to present challenges, and to present a theory that allows us to have clear scenarios about what we want to do. We have university campuses that we are trying to learn about them. We have to rethink about community engagement, about these disciplines, about these new disciplines in the campuses. We are now going to we have to study the differences we face. We have to go over them and to try to build bridges within the university and within our agenda. We have to bear in mind the tight schedules we are facing with. We have to go over policies. This is the reason why this kind of events is very, very important, and in a very important moment in history. We are very sure about how important this will be, and we hope this is just the first one of these events. We are going to have many collaborations with South Africa to come, and we hope to have visitors. We hope to visit also, and we hope to build bridges with South Africa. Welcome, everybody. You are here, you're home, and welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Rafael. We are going to start with the discussion, the exchange that we have here, the panel, with our colleagues from South Africa. The title is Community Engagement in with the South African University. Tomorrow we're going to have some other panels, but in today's panel, we have a challenge to think about what we're doing, because we are going to be discussing challenges that, even though they have a day-to-day perspective, we can also, it's also a really different perspective on how the way we think about community engagement in the university. So here I'm just opening up that perspective on how interesting it will be to think about community engagement. It's going to be a real treat to present the panelists for today. I'm going to read here the names and some the titles, and I also can't see very well, so the font's a bit small. We're going to be hearing Diane Homby, Director of the Community Engagement of the Royal University from the Eastern Cape of South Africa. We are also going to be listening to Margie Maistri's presentation. She's an associate researcher at Rhodes University. She's a director of the African Journal of Higher Education Community Engagement, from the University of Rhodes as well. And we're also going to be listening to Darren Dorton, professor at the Durban's Technological University, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. He's the president of the South African Higher Education Community Engagement Forum and the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement, which is this concept we're going to be talking about of community engagement, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pass on the mic to the holder.
Disculpen porque tenía mal el orden acá. Quien empieza a hablar es Darren. ¿Estás aquí?
Sorry, I had the wrong order. Darren is going to be starting.
Darren. Hola.
Yeah, hola.
Darren? Okay.
Yes, do I start now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for permitting us to return to the continent of South America. For Dai, Margie, and I, this is the second time that we're coming to South America. The last time we were in person, now we are online. In person is to be preferred. Let me start by saying that participation in this webinar is a very special privilege, as we are discussing a topic that we all feel increasingly comfortable sharing with you, especially since we have found a kinship with some of you since we met. Those of you we haven't met yet, we are confident that we will share the same kinship that keeps us connected in the arena of community engagement. Whenever we share thoughts and feelings across the various chasms that divide us, like race, nationality, language, gender, we may not necessarily agree with each other, but we are at least open to sharing with each other our potentially divergent views, and usually in the hope that if we sustain meaningful dialogue, it's worth saying again, meaningful dialogue, then we should find a convergence, if not a confluence of our thoughts and our feelings. Even if you discover that in the end, all that we have in common is our humanity, then hopefully we may soon realize that our mere humanity that we have in common with each other is as vast and deep as the oceans that connect our continental distinctions. In that sense, humanity is international. The shores of Uruguay, Argentina, Costa Rica, and Chile are quite distinct from those of South Africa, but both shores are stroked by vast oceans, the Atlantic and Pacific for Chile. In the same way that even though we, the people of these lands, express our cultures or our shores very differently, we are connected by our humanity. Now, sadly, this humanity, this ocean, has the potential to wreak devastation through the icebergs and hurricanes of poverty, corruption, and deaths from curable diseases. But astonishingly, this same humanity, this ocean of connectivity, also has the potential to cultivate inspiration through the beaches and reefs of poetry, sport, and dance. Speaking of sport, if I may, since I'm so far from Uruguay, the last time we hosted your national football team here, we weren't supporting you. We were supporting the African country of Ghana, but only because we were more connected to the land in Africa than we were connected to the ocean, to Uruguay. No hard feelings. Uruguay went on and Ghana were kicked out, but we've forgotten that. As we proceed, we hope that you will be thinking of the delights of poetry, of sport, of dance, and other delights that almost extract our humanity when we are with each other, irrespective of where we come from. Now, in the space of the scholarship of engagement, the term international typically refers to activities and collaborations, initiatives that involve exchanges, interactions between individuals, like some individuals in the audience and some individuals online, institutions, like the institution that is hosting now, and communities from different countries. These efforts often focus on mutually defined challenges that are experienced by all the parties or by sufficiently many of the parties for all to be included in the activities that they will be embarking on. As a consequence of these activities, these efforts, some sharing of knowledge and resources across borders may occur, but within varying contexts. And that needs to be emphasized because context really matters. Not just across borders, but within countries, across counties, across cities, across provinces in the same country, across streets in the same neighborhood. Now, the involvement of one or more country of origin of participants in the engagement activities, as is the case today, about 5 countries, I think, is sufficient to earn the description or the label international. Just the involvement of more than one country, and we are embarking on an international endeavor. But for the term to be more meaningful, and it is meaning that we are looking at, not just mere, hey, you from a different country. The organizers and or the organizations involved in the activities would need to participate in practices similar to those that underpin the very nature of community engagement research. Namely, the co-construction by all parties of the meaning of the term international and the meaning of the associated activities that warrant this collaboration and initiatives, such as the one we are involved in now. We were, on the South African side, appraised of the details, invited. We met Matthias about 9 or 10 months ago at a conference like this in South Africa. We met him in person at another conference. We have communicated with him, and he remains the link. He is the boundary spanner between you and us. So participants would also need to deliberate on the principles that would guide the activities that are planned. Now, the location of these events and the associated positionality and power dynamics would also have to be negotiated in culturally sensitive settings so that the where or how the activities occur cultivates a sense of belonging among all. Anybody who in their lifetime has played the host knows that what makes a host a good host is the ability to make the guest feel less like a guest and more like a co-host. I'm amongst friends, I'm amongst family, I'm amongst familiar people, even if we speak different languages. This is something I have experienced in villages in India where the language was very different, but the non-verbal communication kept us going. At times in countries that do speak English, I have felt less welcome for a whole host of reasons, including my own, for reasons that you may be familiar with. In a sense, each of the parties involved in determining international activities in the name of community engagement would actually be afforded the opportunity to role play the experiences of community members in the work that we do. In other words, we will be embarking on community engagement activities with each other. However, when these efforts, these activities, these collaborations and initiatives are not being arranged just by organizers, a person or a few people, but actual organizations, then the processes need to be followed are like those already described, with the addition of organizational cultures influencing the dynamics of the relationships that emerge. So when I and an organization that I belong to start working with you and an organization that you belong to across borders, we have all the complications of the borders along with the complexities of organizational dynamics. If you've worked in community engagement and you work with communities that are represented by organizations, you may have some idea of how the complexities that arise become more and more difficult to navigate, and in fact, often make the challenge a lot more exciting to navigate. Now, I have to say, it's reasonable to assume that individuals, people like you and me, institutions like those we work for, communities like those we work with, that have contemplated international activities or collaborations or initiatives in community engagement in the past have to some extent embarked on the journeys employed in our work. In other words, they may have used these community engagement principles and practice to work with each other, as we are suggesting we should. But there are times when this has not been the case. And where this has not been the case, these principles and practices need to sustain the momentum of the international movement. In other words, if we started working with each other across boundaries, across borders, and we didn't start the way we should have started, co-designing the agenda, collaborating in a way that we do when we work with community, then there's nothing stopping us from pausing and re-examining where we come from and why and where we're going to. In much the same way that from time to time, our community work, our community engagement work, causes us to pause and reflect that it might be possible that we, instead of debilitating and stopping epistemic injustice practices, are actually enabling and promoting them through the work we are doing. When we recognize that from time to time, there's a need for us to pause with community, or sometimes pause and reflect on ourselves and then make adjustments. We are human. Sometimes the icebergs emerge and they can be recognized, and we have to circumnavigate them to avoid disasters of a titanic proportion. We, in our humanity, make mistakes, and we need to correct them as part of our humanity. But I'm saying that there exist international organizations that have worked in community engagement, have made mistakes, are making mistakes. National organizations that have worked in community engagement are making mistakes, make mistakes. We should not entirely abandon them until we reach a point where we realize that you are beyond any kind of approach, whoever you are. But until then, we should work with people to make sure that as part of our humanity, we need to stop and reflect and be open to change. So rather than ask questions about why we failed and why this hasn't worked, one thing that we could do is focus on efforts to entrench and return to the principles and practices described in the work of international community engagement. And where they don't exist, let's create them. I've said it, and now I want to emphasize that these principles and practices also apply to national activities. Working with a stranger who speaks a different language doesn't only happen across continents. It happens in my hometown. So how to communicate effectively with somebody who does not share your language as their mother tongue is something that happens in our neighborhoods sometimes. Working with people from vastly disparate economic backgrounds doesn't only take place across the global north or south. It takes place across suburbs within the same area in our allocation. Now, my point is the work that we do nationally and the work that we do internationally have some similarities, and we can learn from each other in these organizations and the organizing of community engagement across provinces, states, and across countries as well. So to test the limits of your sense of humor and mine, I'm being bold enough to confess that from my experiences on the board of SAISEF, the South African Higher Education Community Engagement Forum, and the board of the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement, ISIS, I have learned that developing and applying principles and practices that underpin the work of community engagement amongst collectives of engaged scholars and practitioners is more difficult at times than doing so amongst community activists and community organizations. Now, I must also confess that I suspect that the primary reason for this perception is that the limited time frames that are available for interaction amongst collectives of engaged scholars and practitioners tends to reduce the opportunities for meaningful engagement. For example, today we have a whole hour, 2 or 3 hours to engage with each other. We could start something wonderful. But if this is the only time we're with each other, that's not enough time to talk about how we can mutually take this forward. The work in community engagement often starts with days of first and initial deliberation. Why it should be different amongst practitioners and scholars, I don't know. I suspect because we're constrained by time. And so meaningful engagement is limited by the constraint of time. A secondary reason, and this is personal, deeply personal, might be that I, and the others like me, find it easier to establish connections with members of community than I do with members of the academe. And while I certainly don't mean to separate them in any other way through my experience, I'm simply saying, as an introvert at heart, it's easier for me to open up in settings where I suspect that I'm not being judged unnecessarily. In other words, where I feel a natural belonging that doesn't have to be earned, a natural respect that doesn't have to be sought. In other words, where I feel humanity. And yes, I'm hinting, but not strongly, that sometimes in the academe, we can be human like icebergs, not like sun-kissed reefs. Sometimes, only sometimes. And it happens a lot in South Africa. I don't know to what extent it happens in Argentina, Uruguay, Costa Rica. But I suspect because we are connected by humanity, probably as often. Now, in contrast to the term international, the term global usually implies a broader scope that transcends national boundaries and encompasses a holistic perspective on interconnectedness, interdependence, and the collective well-being of humanity. So when we start doing the work Globally, we think, oh, how can we change the oceans rather than the beaches? It's an oversimplification, I know, but stay with me. Global dialogue among engaged scholars and their community activist partners may then involve not only international collaborations, but also considerations of broader systemic issues, sustainable development. What does sustainable development mean for us, for you, and then for us? Social justice, cultural diversity, all these affect people worldwide in varying degrees. One of the primary custodians of global initiatives in general is the United Nations, whose own efficacy is often undermined by their constitution. Any constitution that allows vetoing is seeking, essentially, unanimity in all decision-making. That is inhumane, not possible to always assemble people together so that they agree 100%. But the smart minds that led us in the 50s and 40s gave us the United Nations, which we still have today, where one country can veto and all discussions become meaningless. May we never use this approach in the work that we do. However, the United Nations has produced for us, through a process of consultation with member states, a set of development goals in two expressions, the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. And while the realization of many of these development goals remains doubtful for many, it is noteworthy that the setting of this global agenda, these global agendas, has been helpful to organizations seeking to operate in the global arena. We don't have to invent the wheel, we just have to use it in such a way that the wheel can move functionally in different terrain. Much of the criticism of the UN is drawn by the varying extent to which the SDGs are achievable across regions, countries, and continents. All I have to say is two words: climate change. It means so many things for all of the people at the table when we gather together to talk about it. Because the wealthy amongst us come there and help us make these goals and then determine that we can't meet them because we have too many cars on the road and we need to keep them to keep our economy going. But I digress. UNESCO has a number of chairs seeking to do work in the global arena. The UNESCO chair in community-based research and social responsibility in higher education, long title, has over the last decade established a global connection of largely South-South partnerships through its Knowledge for Change Consortium, accurately known as the Knowledge for Change International Consortium, which I must do because they might be listening. The work of the K4C Consortium is guided by how academics and community-based knowledge workers contribute to the achievement of the UN SDGs. Through the co-creation of knowledge, worth repeating, through the co-creation of knowledge that is relevant not only in the academe and to the academe, but where it matters the most, outside of the academe. That is locally contextualized, yet globally significant. Through its K4C hubs, the rigorous training of academic and community partners occurs, and the consortium builds community-based participatory research with international partners and has created effective community research partnerships on a global scale that contributes to the attainment of the 2030 agenda set by the UN. One community at a time, and all of these communities, while separated by hundreds of kilometers in some instances and thousands of kilometers in others, are working towards a common agenda in at least 17 different languages. The consortium has 22 hubs spanning 15 countries across the globe, the last time I checked, from Colombia and Cuba to Uganda and South Africa, from India and Malaysia to Canada and the US. Yes, we have some people in the global north who, in our partnerships, actually behave as if they're not in the global north. It's possible. And we are heartwarmed by their openness to learning from each other in the work that they're doing. Now, in my view, and as a biased view, this is a possible exemplar of the application of the principles and practices of community engagement to engage scholars, practitioners, and community actors. In other words, we are now applying this to ourselves in order to drive a global agenda that we have worked on together, consulting people locally, notifying them that we are dealing with a global agenda. And from time to time, we meet online. From time to time, we travel to conferences and then meet each other and sustain the dialogue that we have embarked on. Now, Margie, Dai, and I have been associated with the K4C Consortium since its inception in 2015. Firstly, I encourage you to look up what they're doing. I'm pretty sure there is a Spanish version of all the details that are provided, because we are encouraged in the work that we do to report in the lingua franca, but to also report in the language of the people with whom we are working. So there's some documentation on the website somewhere in isiZulu, a language spoken only in South Africa. And one of the things that we believe in is we need to express ourselves in the language where the issue that is being expressed has greatest meaning. In other words, swimming on the beaches of Uruguay are probably exciting for people from their country, and people in Cape Town may think very differently, but still connected to the same ocean. We will be delighted to share with you what we've learned and what we have unlearned over the years as a consequence of being associated with this international organization with a global agenda. I don't know how long it took. I tried to make it 15 minutes. I'm going to stop now. And I don't know if I'm supposed to ask, are there any questions, or just move on to the next presentation. Is Margie with us? Thank you.
Gracias, Darren. Sí, vamos a seguir con las presentaciones y dejamos las preguntas para el final.
Thank you,
Hacemos-
Darren. Okay, we're going to continue with the presentations, and at the end, we'll have the questions and the exchange. We're going to go ahead with Diana's presentation. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Diana, we're going ahead with your presentation, and then we'll move on to Margie's.
Okay.
Sequence we want to follow, because I think
Okay, había una
Margie's
secuencia que
presentation follows.
Yes, sorry, Augustine. The sequence is for Margie to follow, and it'll make sense through the presentation that she should follow. Shall we continue?
Margie no está en este momento conectada, ¿no? Tiene algunos problemas de conexión.
Margie is not connected right now. She has some connection issues, so we're asking Diana to if she could
Oh,
go ahead with her presentation.
okay. I'm
And
sorry
we're-
to intervene, but she's asked us to do a presentation just in case she does not make it to join us
Okay.
again before the event's over. But we'll be guided by you.
She's unable to join at all.
Bien. Entonces, el equipo de traducción...
Okay, then the interpretation team is going to read. We have Agustín here.
Entiendo que
Okay, to my understanding, it would be easier. It would be better to go ahead with Margie's presentation. So we're going to ahead to ask, if possible, if Darren or Diana could read Margie's presentation.
I don't mind doing that. I know that you've been listening to me for quite long and you're struggling with my accent, but I'll continue. Okay. Margie's is titled The History and Current Status of Community Engagement in South Africa and the Rest of Africa. If I struggle to read this clearly, it's because I have issues with Margie's handwriting, but I'm getting used to it slowly but surely. Here we go. In South Africa and a few other countries in Africa, community engagement is not a new concept. However, its formalization in higher education is a fairly recent phenomenon. In the past, specifically in South Africa,
En el pasado,
CE
específicamente en Sudáfrica,
formed an important part of the liberation struggle as some of the
la extensión
academics and students
universitaria formó parte
in a
muy
few
importante de la
universities
lucha por la
collaborated with and
liberación
often led communities in the struggle for freedom from apartheid.
y colaboraron en las comunidades y a menudo las lideraron en la lucha por liberarse de la opresión del apartheid.
While I meant, that's Margie, to talk on CE from a historical perspective and its current impact,
Aunque se supone que debo hablar de la extensión
I find this to
universitaria
be a
desde una
challenge
perspectiva
as not much
histórica,
is written on the history of CE in South Africa
me
or the
parece
rest
un
of Africa.
reto.
Much of the past knowledge on CE is derived from personal experiences and from knowledge of the then Black students' movements in South Africa that she was a part of. The anomaly of that time is that, on the one hand, universities lacked democratic accountability and responsiveness to the needs of the majority of South Africans because there was no meaningful two-way and reciprocal engagement and partnership between universities and communities, as reported by Bunting in 1994 and cited by Saidi in 2023. On the other hand, it should be noted that in pursuing the objective of engagement, we do not have to assume a tabula rasa. South Africa has a long history of student involvement, often supported by academics, in the struggle and the community struggle, as cited by Valley 2023. Examples include the Cape Peninsula Student Union of the late 50s, the Black community programs initiated by the South African Student Organization in the 70s, and student involvement in liberal universities in establishing support groups for Black workers, such as the Institute for Industrial Education in Durban and the Industrial Aid Society in Johannesburg. Some of these movements gave birth to the Black Consciousness movement, which was led by Stephen Bantu Biko, who at the time was a student before he was arrested and detained and eventually murdered. In addition, prior to 1994 and during the transition, the strong tradition of university academics and students working closely with civil society and grassroots structures continued. In the rest of Africa, Julius Nyerere's JAMA program, 67 in Tanzania, is a well-known early example of community university engagement driven by an activist who eventually led his country and managed to ensure its proliferation. The relationship between community university and contemporary South Africa is significant because of the developmental role mandated to universities as part of the national transformation agenda of higher education, as mentioned in our white paper of 1997. What does transformation mean in the context of higher education in South Africa? It refers to comprehensive, deep-rooted, and ongoing social processes seeking to achieve a fundamental reconstitution and development of our universities to reflect and promote the vision of a democratic society, something that they initially weren't charged to do and may have had difficulty accepting the new charge from a new government. Accordingly, the transformation of higher education refers to the active removal of any institutional, social, material, or intellectual barriers in the way of creating a more equal, inclusive, and socially just higher education system in society. This is a direct quote from the Department of Higher Education Training in South Africa. And just to pause, a very good example of how social justice lies at the heart of these intentions. And they weren't new. Any and all countries across the globe that have pursuing social justice as a result of responding to repressive regimes that formerly led them are doing the same thing expressed very differently in their own languages. So collectively, universities can no longer remain ivory towers, distant and aloof from local communities, especially those who were and continue to be marginalized and disadvantaged, often by the practices of the very universities we are describing. Universities are required to demonstrate social responsibility and commitment to the common good through community engagement programs. Additionally, the social responsibility role of universities in South Africa means that the purpose of higher education can no longer be that of only educating students for the labor market and the knowledge economy. Education in the tertiary level must also prepare students to contribute responsibly to society and be critically active, constructive citizens post-university. Not easy at all. We have what we loosely refer to as an official definition of community engagement, namely initiatives and processes that through the expertise of the higher education institution in the areas of teaching and learning and research are applied to address issues relevant to its community. Community engagement typically finds expression in a variety of forms ranging from informal and relatively unstructured activities to formal and structured academic programs addressed at particular community needs. For example, service learning programs, and some projects might be conducive towards the creation of a better environment where others might be directly related to teaching and learning and research. It's an old reference, 2004, which is why it only makes reference to the expertise of the higher education institutions. That is no longer the done thing, because as we have evolved, we recognize that in the mutual work that we do in community engagement, some of the expertise, if not most of it, lies outside of the academe working with the community. Currently, the conceptualization of higher education community engagement remains fluid depending upon the context and history of the universities in South Africa. Margie and I hadn't planned this, but if you remember, I made a comment about how sometimes organizing within the nation can be just as complex as trying to organize across nations. Very, very different backgrounds, very, very different social settings, and as a consequence, very, very different ideas of what constitutes social justice. CE is often described as the process through which universities bring the capabilities of its academe and students to work collaboratively with community groups and organizations to achieve mutually agreed upon goals, to build capacity, create just and sustainable outcomes, and to improve the well-being of individuals and communities and the university. In that order, the well-being of individuals collectively influences the well-being of communities. The well-being of communities collectively influences the well-being of the university, because every single member of the academe is drawn from a community where they were housed, trained, nurtured. CE is a collection of activities such as engaged citizenry, the nice word for volunteerism, critical service learning as opposed to ordinary service learning, and engaged research, community-based participatory research in particular that we promote. And it aims to address specific social, economic, and political needs, one community at a time, often one issue at a time, but collectively pursuing social justice across the nation. The responsiveness of universities to CE is regarded as central to programs of transforming and decolonizing higher education towards an African philosophy of education centered on communalism and humanism, referred to as Ubuntu in Africa. While CE has made progress as a third mission of universities in South Africa and some parts of Africa, universities are still grappling with understanding the essence of CE as a core mission of universities. There are many in the groupings here in South Africa for which CE is one of those things if we have time for, we will contemplate. And as a consequence, very seldom from those settings do you have contributions to the theory and praxis, and importantly, to actual community-university relationships. Much more work still needs to be done if CE is to meaningfully contribute to the transformation of agenda in South Africa and the rest of Africa. It's not included in discussion, and with Di's permission and Margie's, if I may quickly point out that here in Africa, the elephant is probably the most majestic animal across the continent. Very few will argue against that. the elephant in this country and countries around us have been culled by colonizers. Why? Because for some reason, the elephant's tooth or teeth have fascinated those who've come to our land from afar. The ivory has been used in the metaphor to construct ivory towers. And every single university in my mind that behaves like an ivory tower is a reminder that that ivory came from the culling of the wisest and the most elegant of the animals that roamed our countryside for centuries and have now been reduced to endangered species. And when we meet in these ivory towers, very often, to push the metaphor, I hope it works in Spanish as well, the elephant in the room often is the ghost of the communities that have been robbed to build these ivory towers. And these communities will not continue to allow these ivory towers to proliferate thoughtlessly without including them in sharing in the benefits of the academy's productivities. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias por leer la ponencia de Margie. Gracias, Darren. Y le
Thank you
damos
very much for reading Margie's conference. And let's give the word to Dee to give her presentation.
Good morning, colleagues. I hope you can hear me clearly. So Darren has started with giving you some thoughts around global, and he's read Margie's presentation around the national landscape. So now I'm going to look more at the local, and I'm going to zoom in on one university down in the south of South Africa by the name of Rhodes University. And I'm going to share a little bit of our thoughts from the university perspective. So Rhodes University Community Engagement, which is our division, was established in 2008. And it's fully supported by the senior leadership to progress community engagement at Rhodes, and with the envy of many, because our senior leadership really does buy into community engagement. The vision of our university is to be an outstanding, internationally respected academic institution which proudly affirms its African identity and is committed to democratic ideals, academic freedom, rigorous scholarship, sound moral values, social responsibility, and the imperative for social justice to correct past imbalances and inequalities. So in pursuit of this vision, the mission of the university is to strive to produce outstanding graduates who are simultaneously innovative, analytical, articulate, balanced, and adaptable, and with a lifelong learning, a lifelong love of learning, and to strive through teaching, research, and community engagement as the three core functions of higher education to contribute to the advancement of international scholarship and the development of the Eastern Cape and province, the one we live in, and South Africa. So through the core programs of engaged research, of service learning, and the scholarship of engagement and critical active citizenry, which traditionally was known as volunteerism, our division, which is called RUS, is a significant contributor to the vision and mission of the university. And as part of the developmental and transformative agenda of the university, RUS provides opportunities for the application of academic knowledge and the co-creation of new knowledge between community partners, academics and students, and further enhances academics and students' understanding of the complexities of the context in which we live in our country. So RUSA's goal is to contribute to the Rhodes University vision and mission by doing the following. Firstly, educating students as whole human beings for both life and for a living, away from the very traditional narrow education view of just educating a student to be able to get a job. We put a lot of emphasis on educating them for life and for making a living. So thereby we add value to the students' discipline-based education. And then the second reason is about strengthening community-university relationships for the progression of community development and meaningful university transformation. So at Rhodes University, we do community engagement for community development. So those are the two main reasons and the purposes for us of our university. So I'm just going to share with you now one of the programs that we have embarked on in the education space, and we called it the Vice Chancellor's Education Initiative. When considering that our university, we live in a small city, it is the most significant institution in our city. Our city's name is Makanda. It's the biggest employer by far, and it serves as the educational hub around which the city functions. And the university has been under the leadership of Professor Sizwe Mabizela since 2014. And when he was inaugurated at the university as the university's 6th Vice Chancellor in early 2015, he signaled that he would lead a university that would address head-on the challenges of local young people and build a more inclusive city. So he positioned the university very firmly and unambiguously in its locality, which is the city of Makanda. And he presented priority areas in which the university would focus its attention and capacities. One was the public schooling, and that's the one I'm going to focus on here. Specifically, at his inauguration, Professor Mabizela committed the university to playing an effective role in sparking a transformation by revitalizing public schooling across the city for the benefits of its youth. So he recognized there was a considerable off-campus civil society competence in the education space. And rather than leaving them out, we entered into a partnership arrangement with all local education institutions. Thereafter, he set up a steering committee and he appointed and tasked them to conceptualize a strategic direction for the initiative and for building a coherent framework within which it could both cohere and expand and grow. So during the second half of 2015, the committee set the parameters for this initiative that we called the Vice Chancellor's Education Initiative. And the following year, which was 2016, saw the successful implementation of many projects with a vast number of institutions and organizations, both within and outside of the university. So very carefully constructing those community university partnerships as a path to implementation. So just to give you a few examples of programs, the one flagship program is called the 9/10 Matric Mentoring Program. And this strategic and highly structured program pairs trained Rhodes University volunteer mentors with grade 12 pupils from the local schools. A second project, which was the High Impact Supplementary School, was conceptualized, which recognized that the schooling system, and that as a whole, would continue to fail the vast majority of learners. And the aim of the program was to present this large number of young people with an opportunity to upgrade their results in the supplementary exams that were written in March in every year. The overall aim was to significantly increase the number of bachelor passes with the intention of gaining access to Rhodes University and, of course, other tertiary institutions. We've witnessed immense impact at grade 12 level, which the 9/10 mentoring intervention was undoubtedly a factor behind the record number of bachelor level passes, which are the passes you need to have in this country in order to enter university. From the initial focus on the top end of schooling, we soon realized, though, that many of the education deficits in the grade 12 learners was a result of their experiences in early childhood development. And this prompted us to change our strategy and to broaden it to build a pathway of interventions from early childhood development through to primary to high school to post-schooling. So the whole pathway would be catered for. And this we did in partnership with more local stakeholders working in the education space. So some of the strongest indicators of the performance transformation in Makanda's public schools, going back from when we started in 2016 to last year as a result of this strategy and the related programs, is as follows. So these are some of the impact that we have felt in that period of time. Firstly, the literacy comprehension rates of pupils that are in grade 4 are more than double those in South Africa as a whole. So when we measured our grade 4s, they were reading for meaning. 40% of them were reading for meaning compared to the national average of 19%. So we've almost doubled the reading for meaning rate at grade 4. Then the improvement in literacy rates has helped dropouts. So a large portion of young people who enter schooling do not finish their schooling careers. And we've seen in all these educations that dropout rates have improved by 20% in our city. The matric pass rate has galloped from around 60% 10 years ago to 85% last year. And a record number of learners are securing these bachelor passes, which give them access to higher education. And so the quality, it's not just about passes, it's also about the quality of passes. And what has been really good to see is that in 2012, only 11 local children from our local community were accepted to study at our university. This year, we have more than 170 that are registered. So that is really pleasing. And then there's a sharp upturn in the number of local pupils who have successfully graduated from Rhodes University. So we haven't only focused on access to the university, now we are focusing on making sure that the young people are translating their opportunity and graduating from the university. So partnership and collaboration are at the heart of this Vice Chancellor's Education Initiative. We couldn't have done it without all the partnerships. All effective organizations and educational institutions based in Makanda have been drawn into the partnership and are making tangible contributions. And what's interesting to note, there was a lot of competition amongst the nonprofit organizations in the city before. That's now been replaced by collaboration. And this rich networking environment has generated ideas and enabled really fantastic innovations. And I must put emphasis on that, the characteristic of innovation. So we've used the student human resource in creating a whole corpus of engaged students to mentor high school learners, to impact the matric results, which is the example I gave you in the 9/10. So we have over 500 student volunteers who work in our broader community weekly, and then they complement by service learning programs in the various schools as well. So in summary, what has occurred over the past decade is that our city has risen from being almost anonymous in its educational outputs to being the leading education city in the Eastern Cape for 3 consecutive years. And this meteoric rise of Makanda has been brought about by a wide-ranging collective effort involving numerous public, civil society, private institutions, and donors who have contributed and therefore allowed the work to do. Just to mention two initiatives that would interest you. The first one is the African Journal of Higher Education Community Engagement, and the second is the Postgraduate Diploma in Higher Education Community Engagement. A little bit of background as to why we've started these two initiatives is community engagement is relatively new in our country, new as a core function of higher education. It was only introduced in 1997 and it's still gaining traction. So in order to position it legitimately as a core function, we need to build a body of knowledge on the community engagement philosophy, the theory and the practice. So at Rhodes, we've launched this African Journal of Higher Education Community Engagement in 2022, and the first edition was published last year in November. And it's on an open access platform on the Rhodes Library, and it's the first of its kind in South Africa and in the rest of Africa. And then the second initiative that we have shaped to contribute to this body of community engagement knowledge in our country is the Postgraduate Diploma in Higher Education Community Engagement. There was a real gap, so we've tried to work with that. And that we designed and we've written materials in 2022, and it's in the approval process system of the National Qualifications Authority at the moment. We're hoping to hear within the next month whether it's been approved. So both this journal and this postgraduate diploma helps us to accelerate knowledge building in community engagement, and for us as the university to make our contribution to the national development and transformation mission of higher education. One quick challenge, we all know there are many challenges if you work in this complex space of community engagement, but probably in our country, our greatest challenge is that the function of higher education, there is the lack of a national standards framework for community engagement, which is why individual universities, we are so focused on building that national body. And I'll stop there.
Mongi is back.
Hi, everybody. So sorry.
Perfect timing. Absolutely perfect timing.
You mean you didn't do my section, Darren?
No, we did.
Oh,
with a
good.
different accent.
That's fine. Sorry, I couldn't do anything. The internet is still problematic, but I managed to connect.
Good to see you.
Hola, Margarí, ¿cómo estás? Un gusto verte.
Hi, Margie. Nice to see you. Darren, Darren already read your presentation, but maybe, I don't know, Austin, maybe she could make some comments. You're free to not do the whole presentation again because Darren already read it, but maybe some mentions, some sort of exchange, or maybe with the questions later. When we
Yes.
do the exchange, we can.
Yes.
That might be more interesting and listen to you after having read your presentation. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we are opening the floor to questions, to exchange reflections. Just start it off. I took some notes to be able to make it a bit more dynamic, but it's just a way of organizing that I came up with. And I thought about, with the title of the panel, in this organization that we have about community engagement and try to think about some elements that from the UDELAR and the community engagement at UDELAR we found to be similar to the work or to the work linked to this work of community engagement, and also things that are different. Something being different to us, or maybe it's elements that have both similarities and both similarities and differences, right? So I have a couple of points from each presentation to think about this, right? Similitudes and differences. Okay, so the importance of the internationalization of the strategies or of disagreement with the other beyond frontiers, beyond thinking about the exchange of countries, but instead of finding in these types of exchange, this idea of logical interaction with the other, right? Like Darren was saying this happens with in the exchange with the neighborhoods and people who aren't necessarily academics or from the university. So right, this thing he was talking about, trying to think about the oceans and not just the frontiers. Marcy, through Darren and his lecture, I think she could focus on something that's really close to us and our worries that we really keep at the forefront of our minds at the UDELAR, the involvement of students with this social compromise. What happens to students in this outreach dynamics and the social compromise giving an answer to this vision of students, right? Marcy made a lot of emphasis on the okay, so the reading we had of Maria's presentation, right? She hasn't talked. And talking about these social issues as a collective, right? The interaction of society and humanism. And the university is not just ivory towers. That metaphor with the elephant is even beyond what we were thinking about with this the ivory towers, right? I hadn't thought about the elephant and the ivory tusks. Okay, I'm saying this to just to tell the colleagues, the South African colleagues, we were talking yesterday. We are talking here actually at the Faculty of Veterinary University. There were no elephants, but there's a connection here with the way this former campus gives rise to this exchange. This is a really emblematic building of UDELAR's. There were no elephants, but many animals, and this building currently hosts the community engagement. Finally, Diana, she really brought forward this idea of the students as human beings and not just having them be prepared for a work environment, but also for life. And she also talked about the trajectory of education experience. And here at Apex, we have been talking about in a similar line, but I think it's a really interesting, complete experience to think about. For us, that's like like an education journey when kids are going to high school, middle school, university. Like the education journey, we talk about very interesting working with that a lot. And we have also some discussions talking about popular education. We have some really basic programs like Apex and all of that. We have been trying to develop these discussions. So this is just some points that I wanted to mention to set off the discussion that arbitrarily mentioned, open to interpretation by the public. You guys might have other points. I just open up the floor to questions to the panel have some exchange so we can share some different experience. I have some questions here. I don't know how we're going to do. I show the microphone to you.
Good day, good afternoon, I think, for you.
Buenos días.
Your lectures were very valuable for us, very precious. I thank you a lot. Here in Uruguay, we drink in Latin America from the Latin model of university, you know, that this model that comes from 1918, where the Córdoba movement, where extension came like a movement to university to open to the communities. And we here at the University of the Republic of Uruguay, we have this paradigm of integrality, like the union of all disciplines and functions of the university. And Diane, I want to ask you, especially for this, you talk a lot about this impact of the extension at primary school, at middle school, sorry, that I especially got enthusiastic about, because we have similar problems about the desertion of students at middle school and the low capacity of lecture and writing of our students. So you talk about this impact of extension at schools, but I want to ask you about the movement of collaboration from the experience that students, university students got from going to the schools, and what did they learn about what's the most significant learnings of university students doing this extension to the schools and contributing to their community. I hope I was able to explain myself. Thank you a lot again.
Sí. Sí,
Yeah.
vamos a seguir con las preguntas.
So one of the principles is that the work done in the schools, in the broader community, is mutually beneficial. And the second principle is that relationships are built, because without relationships and warmth, change can't take place, not for the student or for the pupil in the school. So your question around the experience of students, for our students, they first undergo an accredited short course around the paradigm shift of the kind of community engagement we speak to, which is mutually beneficial. And then they focus on, so if they're going to work in middle school and maths, then they focus on maths. So when they go out into the site, they really know what they're going to do. So the programs are very targeted and data-driven. And they also expected to build very good relationships with the young people that they work with. So the benefits will be seen on the school pupils' reading levels, or whatever the intervention's need was. And then on character building and about real world learning. So understanding your context that you live in, the challenges in that context. It will be, the learning will be around your own character and growing in that space. And that we bring to the fore, our students all go reflective process in the program. They write reports, although they are only volunteer programs. They are expected to submit reports, and in that, they have to reflect on their experiences.
Bueno, seguimos con las preguntas entonces, o los...
Well, now, any now question? Because of the translation, we request that the questions are made in Spanish so we can translate them. Okay, thank you very much, Dee, Margie, and Darren. All your presentations were very interesting. I have two questions now. The first one, is there a kind of profile of community engagement that's different between the technological university as a kind of university, like Darren's, in contrast to Rhodes University, for example? Are actually there university differences and the way you work and how the students feel this? And my second question, this is about Marcia's presentation. She was mentioning the students' unions, and is community engagement part of history and part of today's fighting and today university and students' unions, or not so much? Thank you very much.
Shall I take the first question?
Yeah, it's fine.
And then feel free to challenge my perceptions. The short answer is yes. There are differences between universities of technology and what we call traditional universities. And then there's a group of universities called comprehensive, which are a combination of the two. In fact, the differences are more diverse than the ones we're going to describe now, because we have 26 universities. Some are new, some are very, very old and therefore established and deep-rooted in their traditions. But universities of technology have a very strong focus on developing the student to become a graduate that is employable. We pride ourselves on the fact that the work that we do, the research that we do, the engagement that we do prepares the student for the workplace. Whereas the focus of the work in community engagement more broadly is not to just prepare the student for employment, but for good citizenry, whatever that means. And so there's the big difference. And it manifests itself in the local setting, in that, I hope I'm getting this correct, not a single university of technology in this country has what I'm going to call, to save myself, a standalone community engagement directorate or office that deals with community engagement. The best, if in my humble opinion, example of community engagement work taking place not strictly in preparing students for the workplace is located in a university where service learning is combined with work integrated learning and community engagement. collectively. And from my view, that is a wonderful example because firstly, it's funded and projects are allowed to proliferate because it's included in the establishment. Whereas on the other side, like in my university, we do not have an established directorate or office for community engagement. Now, if there are people from my university listening, they might say, hang on a second, you got that wrong. In which case my response would be, when you have a few part-time people whose employment is on a contract from year to year that might come to an end before I end this conversation, that is not an establishment initiative. It's a, we'll move money around to see if we can afford to continue in these practices. And we at the Durban University of Technology are not alone in that endeavor. But notwithstanding what I've just said, the university, the Durban University of Technology, has a few exemplars of excellent practice in the work of community engagement. But it takes place in little pockets there and little pockets there. And sometimes these pockets bump into each other, have conversations, and go their separate ways. So that it's possible that I might work in a community and think that I'm coming to a community and be sitting down and be having, and they can say, no, but you've been here before, not you, but those people. And they did this, and wow, which kind of can be prevented, I think, at least the negative components, if we have something that is established for the purposes of not just knowledge production, but dissemination and mobilization, which doesn't quite happen in universities of technology. That doesn't mean that the work taking place in the traditional ones are consistently excellent. And I'm not just saying that because Dai and Mogi are associated with Rhodes University, but Rhodes University happens, in my view, to be one of those exemplars. And I think, in my view, the primary reason is from the top, the agenda, the strategic direction that includes community engagement has been set. Enough said.
So just to add what you're saying, Darren, is that the structures offered by traditional universities for community engagement helps to better coordinate community engagement activities than in a university of technology, which lacks in a structure, and therefore the community engagement activities seem diffused. So that is one of the main differences in the way traditional and comprehensive universities approach community engagement and the way universities of technologies do. So in answering the question put to me, we need to first understand the universities, the way universities existed prior to 1994, which means there were very clear black and white universities. So in terms of students associating and coming together and organizing, this was encouraged more in the white universities, but not so in the what was traditionally black universities, designated as black universities. So most of the social activism took place within these black universities by students themselves forming associations as social activists in their universities. But post-1994, the establishment of students' representative councils is something that is mandatory in all universities, and universities make provision for that to happen. So there's a huge difference between how students could associate during apartheid and how they associate now. Is that something that you want to add to Dai and Darren? about students' associations? Dai?
Go ahead, Darren.
I was shaking my head, but in the history of the student movements, you had what do they call them? Rag festivals. These were as initiations took place in the predominantly white universities. They bring together these youngsters who are just about to start studying, and then you use them and their vibrancy to go out and raise funds for communities. I can't say that it was completely as I'm about to describe, which is, okay, charitable in the sense that we raise the money by having wonderful parties, getting drunk, but raising money, giving the money to communities, say, here's a little gift to you to take care of yourself. That's one perception. That's a bad perception. But many people, especially white people, who joined the struggle in the past, started in that work, not by getting drunk and enjoying the revelry, but by realizing that there's something that they've been protected from that fascinated them and led to them actually deciding that that's the work that I want to do. And now, about 5 or 6 years ago, the student movement, if you wish, in South Africa, that's now in the free South Africa, rocked to some extent the university system by making demands that were promised to students but not delivered. And the words decolonization and liberal and free education have been bandied about since 1994. But in 2015, 2016, students collectively, in a way that I still don't agree with, but they were effective, led to some changes. And Margie has often lamented that community engagement activists missed an opportunity to be part of that, and perhaps it would not have happened in a way that was so dangerous and deadly for some. But nonetheless, the changes came.
But one thing I want to add here is that at Rhodes University, Dai, and you can let me know if I'm saying anything incorrect here, is that through the Community Engagement Office, that very disruptive period, the Community Engagement Office, because of the way it had prepared students for leadership, and because the way it had prepared students for community engagement, was to some extent able to, after I think some time, manage the process through the relationship between the leadership of the university and students. So to some extent, I think the community engagement experiences at Rhodes University managed to mitigate some of the destruction of that time. What do you say, Doug?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. You know, in 2015, when that protest started, it was led by a very mature group of women, and they had some very legitimate demands of the university. And in fact, they did a lot of good to reposition the university, to make it more thoughtful, to make it, consider areas that it wasn't allowing development and growth. And I think it did a really good job to disrupt the university in a way to make them start to think about areas of the university in a new way. Unfortunately, in 2016, there was a group of young youngsters who kind of started to take over the movement, and it lost a lot of that very deep, thoughtful theorizing and shaping of the new society that group of 2015 activists was doing. But, community engagement, because we're a small team, we rely very heavily on student leadership. So we run 7 volunteer programs, which are very large, and we have 107 student leaders to help us co-manage those programs. And then you have all the service learning programs. So we take student leadership very seriously because without them, we couldn't run all the programs. And so I think that that has had a big influence on the leadership in this university over the years. They're mature, they're robust in their approach, but they've been doing an outstanding job in the space of student leadership. And I think community engagement is one of those spaces where they can really mature, get out the bubble of the university situation and work in the broader community and understand the world in all its complexities and work with real situations and gain immense character building through that process. So I think that more and more the leadership that is grown in this space very deliberately is having impact in a number of areas. I don't know
Bueno,
if the
muy
Vice
bien, muchas
Chancellor,
gracias. No sé si hay alguna pregunta más o algún intercambio.
Is there any other question you would like to ask in the room? Yes, there's one here. I have a question about Marge's philosophy in Africa and how this idea of Ubuntu has inspired extension in these journeys for students. Could you develop this idea, how this philosophy and African history has affected the work and how these lines of thought have contributed to other contexts like in Latin America?
There's something I want to say about this philosophy of Ubuntu. While the origins for this philosophy is attributed to the African continent, I think it is applicable globally, and it should be applied globally. It is about our humanity. It is about humanism. And it is about how we are all interconnected. So, you know, it differs from the saying of, I think I am, which is quite individualistic, to I am because you are, which shows our connection. My existence is tied with your existence. So this philosophy, I think, community engagement provides a very valuable platform in which to spread this philosophy and for students to actually apply it in their relationship with community members. So we get students coming from various levels of the socio-economic dimension. And here, and given the whole separateness of communities and universities during apartheid, it is a very good opportunity for students to be exposed to the reality of what is outside of the university. And in that experience of relationship building, I talked about relationship building, and we always discuss this, Di and I, and with Darren, is that relationship building is the biggest part of community engagement. It's not about just going out there and doing a community engagement project and looking at what the outcome is. The students and academics are encouraged to build this relationship of trust, to build this relationship of understanding with community members. And in the process of doing that, what happens is the cultivation of humanity. And for the South African context, this is critical because of apartheid and because of how the so-called races were separated. This understanding that our lives are interconnected is critical. And that is the core of the philosophy of Ubuntu. And I strongly believe that even though we attribute its origins to the African continent, it is something that can be and should be used globally. Darren, Dai, do you want to add to this?
For me, nothing other than you go, Dad. I've spoken enough.
I think we need I think the question to be asked is, what kind of students do we want to grow at universities? What kind of students will serve our community? What attributes must they have? And our Vice Chancellor always says that we need to grow students that are critical in their thinking, that are knowledgeable, and that have a heightened sense of social responsibility. And I think it's really important, once we know what kind of students we want to grow in a university, that can shape and remake our world. Our world over, is very complex, and it's not something that I think is sustainable. So what kind of students do we now need to grow that can take leadership and be the change agents to shape and remake the kinds of societies that we want to live in? And when we know what kind of students, then we look at, say, can the academic project do all of that? Can they learn everything that we want them to learn between the four walls of the lecture theatre? And if not, what are the other kinds of experiences that we want to create for them so that we do prepare them for life and for making a living one day? And we believe community engagement is one of those spaces where we can offer them experiences that they might not learn in other areas. So, the shift from that very individualistic traditional approach of educate them for a job, which is quite economistic actually, to this paradigm shift to say, let's educate them for life and for that. Nothing wrong with educating for a job, but we've also got to educate them for life and help them to create opportunities where those characters can develop and they can shape away from just selfishly thinking about what they can get out of the university for themselves, but rather how they have been shaped by others and how they can go on to be part of shaping other spaces as well, in the interest of building the kind of humanity that we'd like to live in.
The other thing is this, that, and I mentioned this at another platform, the words how to selflessly love others, how to be compassionate towards others. We don't bring those words into the university or the higher education arena. And students, through their experiences, through their relationships with communities provided through community engagement platform, actually learn about themselves. There's a lot of self-development, self-knowledge that happens through community engagement. And through this also is this understanding of and growing into compassionate beings. And I think that's something that very few people actually talk about when we look at higher education community engagement. These are the kind of attributes that the students develop through their relationships with community members.
If I may just add two things, in my response, I broached Ubuntu very, very subtly. So let me surface the first one. The ocean of Ubuntu is our humanity. If we strip ourselves bare, no matter where we come from or who we are, at the end, we are stripped bare, naked human beings. And what we have, what our positions are, mean nothing if all we have is our bare, this is it. And if we get to that more often, not that we actually practice the nudity, but all that I am, the regalia, the extra stuff, matters not. What matters is that I am, whether you choose to accept it or not, or I do, intimately connected with you. And our destinies, the closer we are shaped. That's a version of Ubuntu. There's an ocean that connects it. The second thing that I subtly, I don't want to emphasize it because I feel like I'm picking on academics. And since many of you in the crowd are academics, I don't want to offend you. But in as much as it is possible for me to do so on a daily basis, I try my best to show my students, not just in the work of community engagement, but just generally, that I'm vulnerable, that I'm human. And when I'm teaching, I often deliberately make mistakes. I teach mathematics. Mathematics is well structured, and if you're paying attention in the classroom, you should be able to pick up that I've made mistakes. And I often do it intentionally. And then sometimes when they don't pick up the mistake, I ask, is this correct? And I ask 2 or 3 times, and I warned them from the beginning of the semester, if I ever ask you the same question 3 times in succession, you better pay attention, something's wrong. And so sometimes for them to realize that it's wrong, I've got to ask, is this correct? Is this correct? Why do I do that? Because no matter what has been afforded me and gifted me and privileged me over my years, I'm vulnerable. And you need to see that there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. In fact, it should be celebrated. And also, as a consequence, I hope I'm approachable. And that's what I continue to quietly decry about the academe. It celebrates and hails excellence, university rankings, the prestige of publishing in a high impact journal. Wow, that's 72 or 73 people read. But 100, anyway, it doesn't matter. That's what we do. We put out, I am so-and-so and so-and-so, and I almost won a Nobel Prize. Who gives the continental hoot when you're sitting in a bus that's heading towards town? You are who you are. And if we can sell that to our students, then it doesn't matter what you become. You will always be who you are. You, me, us. And as hard as it is to do when you're sitting in a crowded room of academics, we can practice this until we perfect it, because all you have to be is simply you. And it's been easy for me because I'm incredibly shy in new company. If I was sitting in the room there with you, apart from the fact that I don't speak Spanish, I would probably sit and quietly smile at you and wait for Matthias to be standing next to me, not just for the interpretation, but because he's someone I've met before. And that, for me, lies at the heart of the work we do in community. You go to a place, and they don't know who the professor is. Perfect. And if possible, you don't know who the leader in the group is. You just sit down, and everybody has this mutual respect for another, and why are we here? And it would be nice if you can take trips for me into these places, and the entire conversation is led by a student, but they don't know that this is a student. We're just sitting there because, we drove here. That's all we're here to do, to drive. And when we step down from our regalia, I think that's when we really open ourselves up to learning and unlearning, which is what community work, in particular community engagement in community, and I emphasize community engagement in community, because a lot of community engagement takes place behind closed doors when we publish in papers based upon work that other people have done in community on our behalf. That's not Ubuntu.
Allá hay una pregunta.
There is another question over there.
La compañera que ya está con el micrófono, sí.
There's another question. Good day. Thanks everyone on the other side for his expositions. My question is related to what you were sharing about stress. This idea how can
la universidad nos transforma como docentes, como estudiantes, como egresados. Y bueno, y en esa reflexión que me parece
How is it possible then community engagement shapes our university and shape our organizations? My question is, how has this been for the diploma and the journal? We are in the South Hemisphere context, and for us, we have some precarious conditions, and we have similar contexts sometimes, and leading a journal might be difficult for us. We have to manage many aspects, and also, for example, in teaching, building a diploma or a postgraduate course tends to be very difficult because many graduates want to go on studying and go on researching. There's also many teachers who believe knowledge is very valuable and they want to keep on. So we would want to have your point on the experiences that have carried from the diploma and from the journal.
No sé si quieren contestar o hacemos la pregunta de Alicia y después ya contestan todos juntos. Capaz que es mejor, ¿no?
I don't know if you guys want to answer or if we do Alicia's questions and then you guys comment all together. So Alicia, go ahead and do your comment and then we'll give them the word to me. Okay, good morning. First of all, I want to congratulate us all on this space that we have created. It's really interesting, and congratulate and thank the attendees, the panelists. What I wanted to do is a question comment that is in the direction of what we had been talking about before, relating to this matter of the vulnerability and interdependency, interconnectivity, right? We were talking about. We are all interconnected. What I was wondering from the beginning of the panel, because of everything that comes with the language barrier and everything that comes with organizing an exchange like this in order to make dialogue possible. What I was wondering is, and asking you guys, of course, what are the challenges and the necessary ways in order to build this South-South dialogue, right? One talks about North-North dialogue that has been built and consolidated, particularly because it starts from the point that it's possible to homogenize all of us, right? To suppose that we are all the same. And I think that actually the greatest challenge for this South-South dialogue has to do with how do we connect and articulate from diversity, right? Cultural diversity, language diversity, etc., etc. Going beyond the fact that we are connected by inequality and social justice realities, right? And many other realities that we want to change. These realities the same realities and inequalities and injustices are different. And so I wanted to ask about this. What do you guys think are the challenges? Or how do we strengthen the South-South dialogue? And with this, Darren, and I will finish with this, Darren was talking about this metaphor of the oceans and the frontiers. I would like to maybe deepen, go a bit more in depth with that. Thank you.
Could I start with the second question first, make a contribution, and then announce that at 10 past of the hour, I have to leave because I'm joining another meeting. I've notified everybody that this one has taken longer than planned, and everybody will be waiting for me at 10 past the hour. I want to apologize in advance for that. And then very quickly to answer, I think some of the challenges that will be posed to a South-South dialogue haven't even been conceptualized yet. But the ones that have are at least easy to describe, but not necessarily easy to resolve. The first is the multiple languages across which we have to work in South-South dialogue. And you're right, it works in the North dialogue because homogenization is the goal. We all need to march in a certain way, and if you stray, you're not part of the group. We think that we have some experience on the challenges of working in one country with 11, 12 now official languages. I teach students whose first language is not English. I have learned partially some of the language in order for me to address the barriers. Because we speak in English and I'm teaching English, and then communication of mathematics takes place in another language, there are obviously are challenges to that. And we work through them. We are presently discussing a change in the language policy. And to my shock and amazement, 60% of the students on our campus have voted to continue learning and teaching in English. That shocked me because I thought that I knew the students and I thought that they were working that way. They wanted to be taught to them in English, and they want the privilege of discussing it in their mother tongue to make sure that they understand. Okay, what's that got to do with South-South deliberations? We, as we sit now, are communicating with each other. We're doing so in a way that involves two languages. And so far, with the exception of the previous question, which was interrupted not through the language, but because I think there were some network issues, this has been an amazing job. It's the beginning. The difficulty is if we were all placed in the room together again 6 months from now, you'd all recognize our faces and we'd have a struggle recognizing yours, except for Matthias, because we've worked and seen him before. That's a challenge that we can overcome. But more deeply, in the notions that underpin nation building, some of which I don't necessarily subscribe to, there always has to be in that notion an othering of another set of people across that border. And what these people often fail to recognize is the othering actually takes place in our own countries. Let's quickly point to the North. In the North, we have a set of elections taking place in which the othering is as vicious as it's ever been before. They're largely all white people, they're largely economically wealthy, and as you narrow down their differences, one's Democrat, the other's Republican, and that changes things. If we want to, we can focus on our differences. If we choose not to, we can seek the common in the humanity that binds us. To go to the ocean, which I will concede is an oversimplified analogy. What it's meant to convey is that the continent of South America and the continent of Africa have got nothing in common as landmass. Of course, under the ocean, we're connected in ways that we can't explore easily. But through the ocean, we're connected. The same ocean that throws hurricanes in a certain way and sends icebergs in another, is the same ocean in which we can relax, swim, bathe, and feel things by the same ocean. My metaphor was intended to convey that humanity gave us Nazism. It gave us the dereliction of the idea that intelligent people with PhDs in engineering and medical science could actually believe what they believe. Now, for those of you who might be Nazis, I offer no apology. I unilaterally reject the ideology. But humanity, whatever we considered, gave that to us. But it also gave us others who were able to self-sacrifice and change and transform the circumstances they found themselves in for themselves and for a country. For every Hitler that we've been given a Gandhi. For every Genghis Khan, and I'm sorry to put them in the same category for people who are offended by them, we have a Nelson Mandela. And the list can go on. Some will continue to look to the one set for inspiration, while others will look to those who never thought of themselves as owned by India, owned by Africa, or owned by wherever they come from, but part of the elders of the world. And I think I hear myself speaking generally, but practically on the ground, I've given some examples of how if I found myself in Uruguay, I know that my conversations with people could not take place without someone that I'm depending upon completely to convey my words in quite the same way they expressed it. That's humanity. That's working together to convey ideas just through translation. And then as the complexities are being conveyed, I can envision myself thinking, oh my goodness, apart from the language, they do things differently. And I could focus on that, what they eat, how they play soccer. Or I could focus on the commonality, because there's always going to be things that I might find some people different to deal with and others easy. But in the end, if we just keep stepping down from all those layers, step down from the ivory, walk outside of the ivory and see the ivory for what it is. It's a representation of harm to the animals that were part of the ecosystem in this country. And look to people and see, yeah, I need you, because without you, I can't walk through this country, Uruguay, without an interpreter. I speak English and people might say, ooh, no, whatever they would say. But at the same time, it's possible that in Uruguay, if I was single, I might connect with somebody at a level that is so deep and so profound that the connection would blossom and grow into something that may lead to a relationship of a different kind across the language barrier. This has happened so many times before, and that's what I look for as hope for those people who've done that. If they can do it, then at a level that's not necessarily involving sexual relationships, then all the others are possible. Why not? We need to step forward and try, and then see what happens. And if it doesn't work, keep trying, recognizing that it's going to fail at times. But if we're committed to this partnership, this relationship, it will be sustained. Shit, it's 5:09. Oh, I'm sorry.
Muchas gracias por las respuestas. Y vamos a ir dando...
Thank you for the answers. And we're going to be closing up this panel. I want to thank
a la
in
carrera
the name of the organization, to the translation career of the Facultad de Derecho, Federico Grum, the professor, and Victoria Zavala, Indira Álvarez, and Ione Introini, Okur, of course, which always supports this organization, Rodrigo, and of course the communication and extension and community outreach units, basically all the professors and the teachers that have worked with the programs and helped with the organization. And of course the audience, This activity will continue tomorrow. What we have now is the panel with the things we talked about. We still have some things to discuss and to share with each other. Tomorrow we'll continue. We'll see each other again. I don't know, Agustin, if you want to say something else. And once again, thank, this time as a closing note, our panelists, Diana, Margaret, and Darren. Sorry about my pronunciation, but part of this similarity is the language, and I hope that you guys have had a nice exchange, that you liked it. To us, dare I say, it was really important and enriching. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us. And I think it's been a wonderful experience for all three of us to share with you and to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.